Welcome to the first episode of DPS 101. I'm Nicole Brady, Communications and Community Engagement Manager for DPS. This is the podcast version of the DPS 101 Leadership Course. It's a school year-long course that takes members of the community behind the scenes, and they learn about the inner workings of different DPS departments. It's an amazing opportunity to learn not only more about running a school district, but also a chance to learn about leadership from the leaders of DPS and perhaps grow your own leadership skills. Unfortunately, there isn't room for everyone to be in the in-person sessions of DPS 101, so we hope this podcast will provide a similar understanding for anyone out there who wants to learn more about Denver Public Schools. And my very first guest today is the head honcho himself, Superintendent Dr. Alex Marrero. Thank you so much for being here to launch this.
Of course, I'm so excited, Nicole. Thank you for having me. And this is not the first time you're interviewing me either.
It's not. The last time I interviewed you, though, was when I still worked for Denver 7. And I interviewed Dr. Marrero several times.
During
I remember
that. Some of them.
Yes.
The last one when we had a very contentious vote, it was up on our floor. Our floor now, because you share the same floor with me. But one of the ones that resonates, we were on top of the parking lot. Do you remember that one?
Yes.
We were facing the building, and it was Welcome to School.
It was.
That was a good one.
That parking garage has such a great view of the front of the Denver Public Schools building downtown. So yes, I do remember. I think that was the first time I ever interviewed you. So several times over the years, but it's good to be on this side now. Can you give us kind of an overview of what DPS 101 is?
I would love to. Can I start by explaining where this concept came from? So as I engage in this incredible work, incredibly complex, and we serve the community. And the community, as you know, has every right to engage with us, but also tell us if we're doing things right or not. So when I would listen to some of the media coverage, when I would listen to some of the public commenters that engage with us, whether it's in the board meeting or simply in transit, and reading the emails, I noticed a tremendous amount of misconceptions, some just in certain cases, things that were fabricated. And I struggled with that, Nicole, to be quite honest. I'm like, wait a second, we're trying our best to make sure the system improves, and we have. Perhaps we're not communicating, perhaps we're not as transparent as we need to be. So I grappled with that for a good amount, for a full year practically, and this came to me. Said we have a duty to not only showcase what our students are doing, and ultimately we have annual accountability measures that we are held to. But throughout that year, a lot happens, and we can do a better job not only explaining what's happening, but also explaining how we function and why. And this is not a knock. We're public servants. All of us are, whether you're superintendent, teacher, bus driver. But it's a little bit different because everyone has some engagement with schools, whether you were a student yourself, a parent of a student. And of course, I say this with a smile on my face, everyone has an opinion on what should or should not happen in schools. Very different when you look at the medical field. We've all, hopefully been to the doctor and had some procedures, but we don't tell the doctor, hey, here's what you need to do.
Right.
But in our profession, and maybe law enforcement, those are the ones that are usually in the spotlight. With opinions. And we welcome those opinions, but I want to make sure that folks are responding and reacting to the facts. So with all of that in my head, I said, you know what we need to do? We need to create DPS 101, starting at the top in terms of the Board of Education and Superintendent, how we function, from policy governance to how I am evaluated, how the system is evaluated. Then we get into how we function, academics, finance, operations, all the way down to transportation, so that's all I was attempting to accomplish, providing knowledge, hence 101. For those of us who do not know, that's how college's courses, the very first round of courses, are referred to. So we came up with this year-long exposure to DPS, really pulling back the curtain, and it was such a hit with those who participated that very first year that they demanded a 201 where we went a layer deeper into the system. So we looked at our portfolio of schools. We got into what happens in terms of school choice, security. So we're at 101 and 201, and it's been much more than I ever would have imagined. And here we are now broadcasting it for those who unfortunately didn't make the course.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you have to limit it somewhere,
Yeah.
but that is the goal. And if people are interested, by the end of this program, we'll share a little more about how to get involved in DPS 101 in person in future cohorts. A lot of DPS 101, of course, is hearing from the leaders. And I know one of the first things that you do when you present to the group is share your own leadership story. Can you share that with us here?
Surely. So I believe, and kudos to the team. I had this idea, and we have an incredible team at Team DPS, as you know, now that you're a part of. They take an idea and they put it into action, and they make it much more than I would have even envisioned. And it was important to them, for those who are part of the cohort, to experience not only the content, but the person, right? So it does start with me. I'm the very first module in DPS 101. And I start with explaining my leadership story. So I bring in an artifact. That's what we were asked to do, at least for the very first year. I brought in a bat that represents my culture, baseball, but also it happens to be the bat that I use for my gender reveal for my son, Axel. And it made me more of a human, a parent, as opposed to the superintendent who has this tall task. And I transition into the content where I speak to, hey, this is not just a schoolhouse. This is the largest employer in Denver. This is a $1.5 billion budget. This is 200 plus schools. This is 15, 16, 17,000 employees, depending on how we're counting our employees. And it brings to light the realities of what we do and what we operate. But my leadership story starts in New York, born technically in Harlem, although everyone thinks it's the Bronx. I was raised in the Bronx, but born in Harlem, raised in the Bronx. And after a lot of obstacles and hurdles and just unfortunate realities and tragedies, every public assistant office that exists, at least in our lives during New York and during that time, whether it was disability, Section 8, whether it was welfare, you name it, all closed their doors on me when I was there by myself. My mom had passed, with the exception of education. And from that point on, I knew that I had to be an educator. They saved one life, those educators who were sitting across the desk. And I've been trying to save one life since then. And I've been able to, and now I'm afforded to do it at 90,000 students at a time. So that's the abbreviated version. Of course, in the DPS 101, we're there for a couple of hours, so I get into some of the nuances of what I experienced. But I ultimately end by saying, here's why I do what I do, and here's why I said yes to Denver Public Schools.
It's an incredible story and shows just your heart and passion for this work. And you were an educator. Did you ever imagine you'd be leading one of the largest school districts in the country?
Never in a million years. To be quite honest, I didn't even know what a superintendent was when I was a student. And I bet if we were to ask our students, actually I know so, because when I visit, I'm introduced, and like, what do you do then? Right? No, because it's a principal.
It's a weird word,
The principal is the person who is in control of that building, right? The person who sometimes you get sent to. No, if you're not, it's the role that people can appreciate and understand, but there's always a level or a layer or several layers above that role. So no, I didn't know what a superintendent was. I never even imagined that I would be a principal. And what I would say is life happens and circumstances happen, and mentors are invaluable, because they may see something that you not only do not see, you have no idea that it exists. So I've been a product of my environment, and I say that because the pain that I endured was real. I would have it no other way. I know that sounds a little bit hard to digest, but it made me who I am. But it also allowed me to be in front of folks who had a lot more wherewithal and experience, who said, okay, not you, Alex, when I was a scholar, you're not dropping out, and not you, you're not going there, you should do this, and sometimes a little bit more of a nudge. It took quite a bit of nudge for me to even be here, because I was leading the school district in New York, and life was great. But I believe things happen for a reason. So didn't even know what a superintendent was when I was a youngster. And when I engaged as a professional, of course, we knew what it was, but didn't seem like that was the path that I was headed to. But no, life happens.
Yeah. Yeah, and as I mentioned, people get to learn about leadership, and the different leaders we have in DPS all have different backstories. You're right that it happens in different ways, and sometimes it's just being there to meet the moment, as you obviously have. So let's get into kind of the meat of what your session in DPS 101 is all about. It's about how the district really works. And starting with the Board of Education, we just seated a new board, in fact.
Yes.
How critical is their role in DPS?
It's the most critical. I'm the operator, right? But I'm can be replaced tomorrow. Hopefully that's not going to happen, but it can. But I believe education is the cornerstone of our democratic society. Allow me to explain. So the duly elected process is in full action in the way how we function as what we call an LEE, a local educational agency. So we are all those who support the system, you, I, all the teachers. And although we're committed to this system, we can take our talents elsewhere. Right? When it comes to the Board of Education, they're duly elected, and they, in my opinion, this is what I would say, they represent the needs, the wants, and the desires of the entire community. So those 7 individuals, whether it's a certain part of the neighborhood, the Northwest, the Southwest, the far Northeast, there is now someone who represents them, because it will be impossible to tap 90,000 shoulders whenever I have to make a decision, right? And then you multiply that, let's say, by 1.5 for the guardians and parents, because not everyone has 2. I surely didn't. So when you add that 90,000 with close to 150, we're 250,000 constituents that we're responsible for. As a public servant, I have to make sure that I am addressing their wants. It's impossible, but this is where the democratic process is supposed to work perfectly. Now I have 7 individuals who represent that 250,000 of constituents, and they're the ones who set the vision. They're the ones who hold the system accountable. I'm the face of the system, so I'm the one who's held accountable on an annual basis, and that's how it's supposed to work. Now, it's easy for me to explain it, and on paper it seems very matter of fact, but we're all human, and as I mentioned at the top, there's a lot of opinions on what should happen in education, what shouldn't happen in education. So it makes it that much more challenging, but also, I have to say, incredibly exciting. When we have those tense moments and those controversial issues, it takes a certain type of individuals to not only appreciate that, to thrive in those situations.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, clearly not all the board members always agree with one another. That it's designed to work that way. Everyone, though, is there to represent the students of DPS and the families and the other constituents. So obviously they are critical in setting the tone and really bringing in what the community wants. From there, it's you, the superintendent, who creates the roadmap for the district, the strategic plan. Is that right? And who do you work with to create that? How does that come together?
Terrific. So yes, that is exactly. So the board sets a vision, not to get too technical, but in DPS 101, we get into policy governance, which is the framework that allows us to function as a Board of Education, duly elected, and the operators, which is me and everyone else.
Nice.
And in those end statements, those are long-term vision statements, if you will. Here's what we want you to pursue. Then I respond accordingly in a reasonable way. It's actually called reasonable interpretation. And those are annual goals. And those are attributed to measures and outcomes. So that's how we do on an annual basis. And the end statements usually stay the same, although they were just recently updated this past year. And previously they were around for 4 years, right? So the vision sticks around for a bit. What we do to try to achieve those changes every year.
Wow.
So that's how we function in a very technical way under policy governance. And there's 2 ways that we are embarking in how we engage in our strategic plan, which we do call the strategic roadmap. Reason why we call it a roadmap, when I came on board, it was right during the tail end of COVID.
Yeah.
And many organizations, the ones that I led out east and here, the Denver 2020 plan, which was the strategic plan of that time, they were all shelved, and rightfully so. We were in a crisis. We needed to pivot, right? So what I learned, although it's just a name, to me, it speaks volumes that a plan is something that you either do or you do not. You need some closure there. A roadmap allows you to be nimble, right? So if something happens, we're going to continue with our North Star reflected in those end statements. In this case, we have 4. But we're prepared and nimble to adapt and then continue on our journey. The very first iteration of the roadmap, I engaged deeply with the community, and I engaged in a listening and learning tour. Then we went into a transition team who helped me digest all that information. Then ultimately we came out with this roadmap. And what I often say is that's a regurgitation, if you will, of the needs and wants of the community as I went out and gathered that as a new person into this incredible city. That also was in line with the end statements that the board was creating at the same time. So that means that what I discovered was similar, if not identical, to what the board also engaged. Back to this whole notion of being a democratic society. The needs and wants and desires of the board were captured in those end statements, and I heard the same thing as I build the roadmap. We are in our final year of this roadmap, so that means that we are not only concluding, we're also building the new one. There's no need to engage in a deep listening and learning tour, but right now we're taking a different approach in terms of making sure that we can continue with our DPS 101, with our advisory councils, and you name it, we have it. We're establishing an LGBTQ plus advisory council. We have our Black family advisory council, our Black education advisory council, our Latino, Latina advisory council, you name it, it exists. So we're looking to maximize our structures that we've built to have a more streamlined information gathering, not only to inform, but also so we can disseminate. Excited about that work. So we're looking forward to Roadmap 2.0. It doesn't have a name yet, Nicole, but the next iteration of where we're headed for the next X amount of years.
Excellent. Yeah, no, it's interesting when you point out all the different voices coming in. I've done some work recently with the collaborative school committees who help advise individual schools. And then from there, there's the District Accountability Committee and all of the committees you just mentioned that really are able to bring in all those voices of the people they represent to be able to make sure that you're getting all the data, the voices, the opinions, and all of that very, very streamlined, as you said. So
you're going to add in terms of how we've also streamlined data collection, but also how we can disseminate information. All of those committees that you mentioned and some of the advisory councils that we call ACTs, they all funnel upwards, if you will, towards a super ACT, Superintendent Advisory Council. I actually have a meeting with them tonight.
Wow.
And that's going to be a pivotal group who's going to support not only the implementation, but the rollout of this new strategic roadmap.
Awesome. Super ACT. Okay, that's a new one for me. So once you have that strategic roadmap in place, you monitor progress. Is that right? And so kind of take us through, that's what you've been doing, obviously, the last few years, still doing, and will do for DPS Roadmap 2.
That's correct. And that roadmap covers the gamut from academic outcomes, starting with our graduation rate, which we've been able to meet. I have some embargo data that I can't share, but all I can say is
you had a thumbs up sign there in case for those listening. Yes.
Perhaps by the time this comes out, we
Great.
can celebrate widely. We also have our academic assessments, our summative assessments, starting with our youngest scholars, READ Act, our CMAS, our Colorado Measures of Academic Success, and of course our high schools. But we also have other components of where the community wanted us to go, hence us regurgitating what the community wanted for. So in there, we would have now completed 10 equity audits, and that's covered the gamut from vaccinations all the way to how we support our innovation zone schools and our innovation status, which is very unique to the state of Colorado, and everything in between to make sure that we can grow from what our lived experiences and also how we implement. And yes, we report out not only to the Board of Education, if those are also in line with those reasonable interpretations that I mentioned earlier, but beyond that, in an annual update to make sure that we are not only being transparent, monitoring progress. And for the most part, we've met a good amount of them. In some cases, we're falling short, but that's good because we're heading in the right direction, right? When it comes to end statements, vision statements, and even aspirational goals laid out in the strategic roadmap, we always want to achieve them. But if we are showing progress towards them, and even if we fall short, the momentum is already there. So I'm excited to continue that work. So as long as we're heading in the right direction, it's the most important thing. It's also great to celebrate, but even if we fall short, no, we're encouraged by what we've seen and what we've accomplished.
We've heard so many successes this year already. This kind of year we hit the green status for the district under the district
blazer.
Performance Framework. Yes, that wasn't an accident, right? Yeah. And of course, you talk about this during DPS 101, the successes. Is there any one that you're most proud of right now from the ends goals?
That's hard to pick one. The one that we're celebrating, actually today I'm wearing yellow. I don't know if it's showing, but the yellow, we started our day at Abraham Lincoln High School this morning. And after 9 years of being, and I'm putting this in air quotes, persistently underperforming, right? Because that's part of a framework that a lot of folks have some opinions on, but nonetheless, whether we want to debate it or not, it has been classified as persistently low performing based on results. Our school performance framework that the state offers for all of us. And for the first time in almost a decade, it shifted from red to yellow. So it went red, orange,
Very
yellow.
Good. Wow, 2 up.
The next would be green. And more importantly, now it's on watch, which means that it's shown enough progress that if it continues this progress, next year it'll come off the clock. And when I say the clock, that's a place that we don't want to be. That's on clock, meaning that you're on watch because there's concern about what we're doing with the student experience at said school. And we've had an incredible outcome when it comes to moving schools off the clock. Several years ago, a very similar story with one of our other flagship schools, Manual High School, was persistently low performing as defined by being on the clock. And a couple years ago, they came off altogether. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but that right now is so new news and such exciting news and necessary news for the Southwest community and Abraham Lincoln and all those legacy graduates, one of which is our board president, Sochi Gatang, is a graduate from there, and she was with me this morning. That one is new and fresh and incredibly exciting. But we can't just claim victory just yet. We have a year to go, and we will be successful. I would say it's graduation rate, because it's one thing to have surpassed all-time highs, and we've consistently done it every year. So every year we set a new high. And when you think back, although this is well before my tenure, at one point the graduation rate for Denver Public Schools was 38%.
Wow.
So when you think of where we've gone, right, and the fact that there has been major shifts on what we see happening outside of high school, meaning at one point it was college and college only, right? Maybe before that it was military. Now it's a whole lot of getting ready for the workforce, so it's more of career, college, and beyond, and life. We're making sure that students are prepared to engage in whatever that is. If it is college, terrific. If it's career, we're making sure that they're ready with work-based learning experiences. So we're preparing students for our local and global community. And I'm absolutely sure that we are, because I've seen it happen in all of our high schools.
Well, thank you for sharing that, because I think it gives some perspective on the ground level work that has to be done to make these big visions happen, and celebrating the success of one school is important for the entire district. You run a school district of some 14, actually you said depending on how you count the employees, it could be 15, 16,000. We don't have the exact number exactly today, but how do you talk about that work that's done by so many people, and you are the leader they look to keep them all motivated, to keep everyone on track, to keep everyone with the same goal in focus?
Yeah, in terms of the amount of employees, we have our certificated and those who are part of our bargaining units. But when we think of those who are contracting with us and substitutes, the number starts to grow. And I know that because I have some banter with some of my colleagues, CEOs, and whether it's the airport, our mayor, of who the largest is. We're definitely one of the largest in the entire state, and that cannot be debated. But in Denver, I believe we're number one. And there's always a little bit of caveat. How are you counting your employees? Like, for example, in the airport, are you counting all of the vendors? Right? So that's when we have the nice banter, the airport and I. So here's what I also can say. Back to this whole everyone understands education, has an opinion in education, and rightfully so. We've all gone through it in certain capacities. But no one's telling the airport director on how they should fly their planes, right? So to me, although it's the most rewarding work, it's the most challenging because you have to deal with folks' lived experience and opinion, right? And sometimes it could be, based on their intense experience. Sometimes it's just research. I often joke that I also am guilty of that behavior. Every single time I watch the Giants, I have a whole lot of opinions of what should have happened. It's very different if they're coming after you, right? So I try not to be a Monday morning sidearm quarterback, but I also know that that's going to define education whether I like it or not. But what I can say is that there's no agenda on how we show up. And me and my team, and we go through this in DPS 101, they get to see who Trina Marçal is. Someone who's homegrown in terms of her talent, who started, and now she's leading operations, which is in a very intense way of showing up to work every day. It's a heavy lift that she has. You see Chuck Carpenter, who started as a teacher. Not many CFOs, chief finance officers across systems that manage well over $1 billion can say that they know what that experience is to be in the classroom. We all can remember what it is to be a student, but sometimes when you've been in the trenches. So what I try to capture is, and I know there's always a question that I have to respond to. You didn't ask this, but I do a lot of superintendent trainings for those who aspire, whether it's small or large like us. What is the magic bullet? There isn't one, because if that's the case, it should have happened a long time ago. It's hard work and making sure that you can function with integrity. But what is the most important role? And that's hard to answer. But the larger the system is, the more defined that my response would be, it's the principalship. Because once you've been able to engage a community, even if it's a local community, and work collaboratively with your staff and embrace your communities and empower your community to make decisions, that is, in essence, is what I do, just times 207.
You talked a little bit about how you meet with CEOs of other large companies, or the airport, for example. Is running a district similar to running a large company, or what are the big differences and similarities that you've found?
Oh, I love this question. I get to answer this now. Hopefully the masses get to hear this, because I often just say this to them directly. My colleague CEOs who make a whole lot more money than I get. It's the private sector. This role is way harder than them. Let me explain, please. Can I?
Yeah, please.
Because it's not just black and white in terms of matter-of-fact decision-making. Right? We have to make sure that it is community-driven, or at least transparent, because we're public servants. And in certain cases, not to identify any CEO, comrade, but it's simply the decision of the CEO with the support of board of trustees. And it's done, and it trickles down the organization with hardly any explanation. It's just done, right? We move on. So if we're making these cups, and this is our organization, perhaps these are not selling, Nicole, and we come up with one that is no more thermal, right? This is out of production. The team that was doing this is unemployed, and now we engage in some new innovative. End of story, right? I'm minimizing and generalizing, but it does happen that way. I teach a course in where I explain this, and I use the Mr. Burns analogy from Simpsons. I don't know if they may not know what that is, but the Simpsons, the way that he engaged, he was a CEO, and he was very much, here's what happens, right? In our case, it doesn't work that way. No, I have a board of education that needs to endorse a recommendation. And before we even get into a recommendation that's being weighed on the board agenda, I have to do my due diligence and engage in the community, be informed on my recommendation, and making sure that I address how the either intended or unintended consequences of said decision are going to impact ultimately the student experience. So we often say in the roadmap, there's the DPS experience, the Denver Public Schools experience. It's broken down into three. At the core is the student experience. Often neglected in a lot of other organizations is the adult experience. Interesting. Right? And what differs, other CEOs, they may not have a collective bargaining unit. No, actually, you don't see that in the private sector at all. And in certain cases, unfortunately, here in the state of Colorado, it's not very common either. I was engaged with one superintendent who is grappling with their very first collective bargaining unit that's may or may not assemble.
Wow.
And we have 10 here, right? So that in its own speaks volumes of how different the role is. And the third experience is a system experience. And that goes to operations, finances, but also the oppressive systems that do exist in education that go well beyond the time of DPS even being imagined as a school district. So all those three experiences make up the DPS experience. So I have to take that into account as I engage in every decision or recommendation that I'm bringing to the board. Having colleagues in different roles that are not in the public sector who are CEOs, they don't have to do any of that. So,
yeah.
One example.
Yeah, it's
in terms of how we're still similar. We're at the head of an incredible organization, and there's a whole lot of opinions on what we're doing and whether we're doing it well or not. But I think that the similarities, aside from title and maybe that outlook in media, they're very, very different. Ours is way harder.
Well, you have to work with so many of those CEOs, though, because as a school district, you are putting out the future workers in Denver, in Colorado, and I find that fascinating how involved DPS is with so many businesses and organizations here in Colorado. I've been doing the DPS mentorship program this year and had a chance to go with the mentees to a work site visit last week where they get to see a big Denver office building and all that work in action. And it's really great to see how many companies want to be involved with DPS. They're doing something with the mayor next week, actually, and so we know that there's just so much involvement between the school district and those other organizations.
That's also something that sets our roles apart. Yeah. In certain cases, that it could be a tremendous need. I'm sure, just like the internet wave that happened and all the e-commerce, a lot of those organizations don't exist anymore. Right. Perhaps we'll see the same when it comes to artificial intelligence and quantum. It ebbs and flows in terms of what a business ideas turn into a large enterprise, and then there's a demand, and then it's evaporates in certain cases. Education's never going anywhere. We cannot be replaced. We are the foundation of everything that every other organization is attempting to provide society. We are truly the foundation of everything. So in our case, we can't disappear. We won't disappear. And that's one of those areas not only that makes this so rewarding, but sets this role apart from any other. And in reference to CEO to superintendent, but also when it comes to those who are engaged in the work day to day, and when it comes to teachers and so forth.
Well, thank you for shining a light on the DPS 101 course and your process. Obviously, you have one of the hardest jobs, I think, in the city of Denver. And it's great that people are getting a chance to learn more about that. It's great that they get to learn from other leaders in the district as well. As we mentioned, we'll be continuing this podcast throughout the next few months with other leaders in other departments, including operations, finance, as you mentioned, student and family empowerment, even communications, which is the department I work in. So you'll be able to hear those conversations as well. And if you are interested in getting involved in DPS 101 in the future cohorts, or in possibly 201 and from there beyond, there are signups that you'll see out there. Hopefully more information coming online this coming semester, this spring semester, and into the summer for how to get involved in the next cohort. But in the meantime, thank you, Dr. Marrero, so much. This was so much more interesting than any interview I got to do with you as a reporter, because they were always like 15 minutes and we had to cut it down to like a minute and a half long segment. So this is what I mean. I never had the chance to really sit down and talk more. So thank you.
I appreciate that. One quick, and I'm sure they're not going to be bothered. It's 5 years ago, but back to that comment of one of the toughest jobs. Yeah. I remember when I first was named as superintendent, I received a couple of phone calls. One from Mayor Hancock at the time, who said said a whole lot of things. Really? He said, you have the toughest job in the city. Then I had one from Governor Polis, who said the same thing. So at one point I was thinking, what did I just sign up for? But respectfully, gentlemen, I disagree. I think I have the absolute best job, not only in the state of Colorado, across the nation, considering everything that we're embarking on.
Keep up the good work. And again, thank you for listening. Be sure to subscribe to the DPS podcast for more podcasts on other topics. And as always, thank you for listening.